Got a little time here to kind of shed some light, hopefully, on an ongoing problem that I've had with this 98 Ranger, where the coolant temp gauge always read below 0, and the live monitoring of the computer always showed the engine running somewhere around 140 degrees, which is very cold. So in an effort to do a couple things: one, get that fuel or the water temperature gauge working, and also to try to get some heat into the cabin, into the cab. So I figured out that the resistance cold on these two sensors are different, and it took a while to find this black colored sensor, which is the correct one for the gauge. So the resistance cold for the ECM sensor shows to be somewhere around 50,000 ohms, 48.5 K. So that's about 48,600 ohms between the two contacts. The coolant sender cold, this one's reading about 5,000 ohms between the two wires. Now, because the thermostat housing on this 98 2.5 is plastic, the 2-wire sending units are required for both the ECM and the sender for the water temp gauge. The way you can tell the difference for the wires for the coolant gauge versus the ECM sensor is the water temp gauge wire colors is a black one with a white stripe and a red one with a white stripe. Now, the connectors, due to years of trying to troubleshoot this on and off, have just crumbled and disintegrated. So I had to use some Molex connectors, but it's been working fine here for this troubleshooting event. When I get a chance, I'll replace them, but they're expensive, and this is working fine for now. Also, it allowed me to verify that by touching these two, the black and the red with the white stripe on them together, that when I turn the key to the ACC mode inside of the cab, that the fuel, I keep saying fuel, water temperature gauge did in fact go to hot, which tells me that the cluster is working. Now, it does not matter which one of these wires the sensor gets plugged up to. It's not polarity sensitive. The ECM wires is a green with a red stripe, and looks to be a kind of a gray with a red stripe on it. And I know that the signal from both the sensor and the sender are working, as I can watch it live on the on my little blue driver OBD2 diagnostic tool. So I can actually see the live water temperature of that sensor there, so I know I'm getting the signal as it goes up with water temperature. But a couple of points of interest with this thing that's been plaguing this vehicle for a long time is besides the water temp gauge not working, is the fact that the heat inside of the cab has never really been all that great. Well, what I found out, a couple of things. When I first got started into this project, after the engine was warmed up, this was warm to the touch. Not hot, ever, just warm. Okay, the radiator was always kind of cool, never hot. So I suspected that the thermostat was not working, and when I pulled the thermostat housing out, I verified that to be true. It came apart in about 6 pieces. So I figured, okay, well, let me buy a new thermostat, change the sensors to the right ones, put it all together and see if I got heat and a water temp gauge. Nope. So then I noticed that these 4 hoses here to the heater control valve, only one of them was hot. Well, actually, yeah, kind of just the one was lukewarm, not hot. All of these I could touch with my hands with no issues. Okay, I had been using this right here to try to bleed all the air out of the heater core and the hoses, but evidently that wasn't enough. So, long story short, I looked online, saw there was lots of water pump impeller wear issues, and I said, okay, well, let me go ahead and maybe I'm just not pumping enough water into the heater to make it work. So took all the front off the engine, changed the water pump down there, and still no temperature gauge. And no heat. This time no heat. Scratching my head, couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. So I came back here and I noticed, it's gonna be hard to see, just trying to find a flashlight here. There's an arrow on this control valve pointing that way. So when this thing is relaxed, this control valve is relaxed, water is supposed to flow through the heater core that way. Well, actually it's going to come back this way on this one. Here's my source line, my pressure line from the pump, and this would be the return back to the inlet side of the pump. So when the air conditioning is turned on, vacuum gets applied to this control valve right there. This valve then closes, and now it circulates and bypasses the heater core altogether. That's kind of what my understanding of this is. So, while I was frustrated, I had taken all these clamps loose, trying to figure out where was it getting blockage, because I'd already verified that when I blew through this heater core that it was free and clear, and this heater core is replaced by me, so I knew it was good to go. But for whatever reason, I just wasn't getting, these were just only lukewarm, never hot. So I had all the clamps loose, trying to bleed all the air out, and what I was doing was I was pushing up and down on the lever for the control valve, when all of a sudden the water that was coming out of these valves became steaming hot. Okay, I put the clamps back on, and suddenly these hoses became so hot to touch that I couldn't even grab them, couldn't hold on to them for more than about 3 seconds. 1001, 1002, 1003, and I had to pull away. Okay, so while I was going around to the cab to see if I had heat inside, lo and behold, the temperature gauge was reading perfectly normal, right in the middle. Okay, so I came back out here, grabbed these again, they're smoking hot. Then I disconnected this gray hose here and drew on it, and these got cold, but these stayed hot. So my only guess with all this is that somehow or another, I was getting an air pocket in this little upper area of the thermostat housing. You can see I've got a leak here. I've got to change this this thermostat housing anyway eventually, because the little grommet down there is leaking, but no big deal. But yeah, so in normal operation, this here will get hot and cold. And I'll get the engine warmed up and we'll talk about it further here in a second.
Unfortunately, the engine noise didn't allow me to leave the mic running on the GoPro, so I muted that out in this segment of the video. But the purpose of this is to show the various temperatures of the incoming water flow to the heater control valve, the water temperature, at least as viewed from the hose external portion using the infrared meter. But I was able to use this as a tool along the way as well to try to figure out what the heck's going on with the fact that I had no heat inside of the cab, and why the upper radiator hose was only lukewarm at best. But as you can see, the temperature gauge all of a sudden started working once I almost burped that bubble that has gotten stuck in the thermostat housing, I believe. And so the water temperature's working normal, and the heat inside of the cab seems to be pretty good. It still runs very cold. In the next segment, I'll actually monitor the temperature that the ECM sees, and that's from that separate sensor mounted on the thermostat housing towards the rear. So hang tight and we'll show you what the ECM sees.
Okay, I'm going to plug this blue driver OBD2 connector in. Kind of look at some live data. Pretty good unit. Doesn't work too well with iPhones, but okay. So once it's connected to the Bluetooth, I can open up the app. It's about 47 degrees outside, rainy and cold. And live data. Let's see. And looks like I got some fuel trim issues that I'll fix later. Just trying to compensate for some sort of a leak or a bad sensor, but I'll figure that out later. Alright, so what I want to do here, so I'm going to monitor engine RPM. I'll shut the fuel systems off. Oops. I know there's a water temperature option. Fuel system, engine load. Here we go. Alright. Alright, so let's see here. We're engine's sitting there at about 100. The ECM is seeing about 178 degrees of water temperature now, and that was down there at about 134 before. We're at 961 RPM, but that's a whole lot better. Wonder why our intake temperature is so high. I guess because I'm not moving, sucking in warm air from the exhaust over there. Some whacked out O2 sensor readings there. I got a bad O2 sensor. Anyway, so this video is just to kind of show you, I've got a 192 degree Fahrenheit thermostat in there now, and the engine's running at 180. I expect that if it was on the highway, the engine load high, it would probably be closer to that 190 mark. I haven't checked it yet. But this video is just simply kind of pointing out some of the frustrations that I've had with this 98 Ranger for many years, but just had a chance to take a look at it for my son and get it right. And one of the biggest complaints he's always had about this truck is not knowing how hot the water temperature is. And so we fixed that. We have fixed that. And the only thing I can figure is that the bad thermostat before, and the plumbing to the heater control valve being incorrect. I'm not sure if it was myself when I changed the heater core, or if it was my son because I think he changed the control valve once. I don't know if it got hooked up backwards or what, but there is an arrow in the line that goes from that the fuel pump outlet at the thermostat housing is the one that gets connected to that arrow. So I'm tickled, and that's it from here.